Why did Trump win the 2024 election, and how did he secure the biggest victory for any Republican in a generation? Now, on paper, the outcome of this election isn't totally surprising. Polling, in fact, did give Trump about a 50-50 shot at winning, but it was the sheer scale of the victory that caught the country off guard. Trump won every swing state in the country, some by pretty big margins. He also became the first Republican in a generation to decisively win the popular vote. And what's more, Republicans clinched both the House and the Senate, giving Trump full control of the federal government with majorities in Congress, the White House, and a very favorable Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the political left seems to be in disarray. Key constituencies like Black, Hispanic, young men, and working class voters actually shifted pretty hard to Trump. He won the largest share of minority voters for a Republican in over 6 decades, and his decisive win signals the start of what it looks like a new political realignment. So, how did the U.S. go from this map in 2020 to this one in 2024? And how could Trump pull off something that was once thought impossible? Well, oddly enough, the answer lies in a pattern that has been brewing for almost a decade. In 2016, after Hillary Clinton's shock defeat to Trump, many Democrats believed that it was just a fluke. It was a quirk of the Electoral College that didn't actually reflect the true will of the people. They thought the demographic change would inevitably hand them victory in future elections, and that their coalition of the ascendant would eventually sweep Republicans out of power for good. But fast forward to 2024, and we see that the opposite seems to be happening. Rather than building a new, dominant majority, the left have actually alienated huge segments of their own base. Their policies have driven away key voting blocs that once made up the backbone of their party. Instead of addressing the core concerns of these voters, the left spent the last 8 years doubling down on lecturing the American people about how anyone who didn't agree with them must be a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, or a bigot. They've pushed an aggressive cultural agenda that included open borders, radical gender ideology even in the classroom, and divisive racial politics that framed half the country as the enemy. They presided over a crime wave in major cities fueled by defund the police rhetoric and policies that prioritized ideological purity over public safety. And rather than addressing the economic anxiety brought on by inflation, soaring housing costs, and stagnant wages, they touted macroeconomic figures that meant nothing to the average American struggling to buy groceries or fill up their gas tank. And as a result, millions of voters who once reliably voted Democrat felt abandoned by the party. In short, the left fundamentally misunderstood the electorate in this election. They alienated key constituencies with their ideological rigidity and fostered, rather than addressed, deep cultural and economic divides that many Americans are simply exhausted by. And this time, millions of disillusioned voters turned away from them and handed Trump a landslide victory. But here's the question. Will the American left see the results of this election as an opportunity to engage in the kind of deep and meaningful introspection that they regularly prescribe to everyone else? Or will they simply dismiss it as evidence of the bigotry, intolerance, racism, and sexism of the voting public that they warn us about? And while it may be a little too soon to tell, one thing seems certain. Voters are rejecting the narrative that they're the problem, and will most likely continue to reject political parties that insist otherwise.